Good afternoon, everybody, or at least the people who have turned up early with your crisps and your sandwiches and your cans of pop. It's great to see you, at least to see you on screen. If we haven't met before, I'm Paul Furey, and I'm going to be joined by the rest of my colleagues in a moment. Suffice to say, you've still got a few minutes to get yourself together, that tuna salad, to pull the shades down, and just generally organize yourself for the next hour or so. Switch off all those devices, leave the office well and truly behind for a little while, and grab some time for yourself. And of course, that's a big theme today, is how to look after yourself, how we look after ourselves. So we're letting the rest of the people through the door now, and we will start pretty much on the dot of past, if we can absolutely help it, and go from there. So yeah, lots of people walking in now. So I'll leave you in peace for a bit to munch on your lunch, and I'll be back. Hello again. So a big warm welcome to all of you. I'm Paul, if we haven't met before, and I'm going to be joined by my colleagues in just a moment. Just a few sort of housekeeping bits at this stage. You're all muted, so you can make as much noise as you like, eating your lunch and slurping your drinks. It's absolutely fine. One of the really big things about these webinars is to get your participation, to get your ideas and experiences. It really is what makes it, and we can feed off what you're telling us. So you've got a question tab or little section of your screen in the control panel. You can just pop things in there as they occur to you, and we're going to try and give you plenty of opportunities. We'll just go quiet for a moment, and you can then type something in, and we'll try and do a joint effort in keeping in touch with all of those comments. And we aim to answer everybody's questions and to respond to all comments that are non-technical. The technical stuff Nicola takes care of. So if you have a tech problem, then Nicola is definitely the person for you. If you can just put tech in front of it, or Nicola, I've got a problem with this or that, she's the one who will be able to help you with that. And the rest of the team will keep an eye out for the questions. We've still got people turning up, so I won't start just yet on the main bit. But what I thought I might do is, just for a moment, is to do a bit of an advert, a bit of a plug for us, because we're not actually, we're not a webinar company. This is not what we do for a living. What we actually do is we run projects. About half of our time is spent coaching, and the other half is spent doing projects to do with having real conversations. Right now, of course, those real conversations are really chiefly about listening to what's going on for people and being observant, particularly if you find yourself in a leadership position, but also if you find yourself as a colleague. It's especially important at the moment, obviously, as you've found out, because we've been in this situation for 3 months now, more than 3 months, to keep an eye out for people, giving encouragement, but also we all realize now that because this is normal and we're not all going to go dashing back to our offices anytime soon, we also have to be able to criticize people, to have disagreements and even arguments, and to come back from those. And that's where we operate. We're in that realm of having those real conversations, and particularly now, perhaps, where it's the really, really important bit. So these webinars are a chance for you to get to know us, how we think, how we speak, what we're like, and you're going to meet 4 of my colleagues today, which are fantastic. You've got five minds on the situation, on the problem of the day, which is staying okay. So 5 people coming from very different viewpoints. So if you'd like to all come and say hello now, team, there we are.
Hi. Good everyone.
Oh, good afternoon. Nigel's so used to doing it. This is the first one we've done at 12:30 in the afternoon. So that's a strange one for all of us. Anyway, so I think the main aim for all of us is to get you to experiment. We're going to do a few things live today between us. I'm going to, I think, come under the spotlight a good deal, but we're also going to try and incorporate your comments, as I said before. So please do make use of that question pane. So first up is going to be Rachel, and what I'm hoping that Rachel is going to do is to give you a rather different take on resilience and what resilience means. So the rest of us are going to disappear for a bit, and yeah, Rachel, it's over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So resilience has been increasingly in the spotlight for the past 20 years or so. It's given rise to lots of great ideas and concepts such as grit, mental toughness, hardiness, strengths-based coping. I could go on. The definitions of each of those things all seem to allude to the fact that you need to be strong or tough or gritty to be able to get through these things, with the underlying assumption being that if you are affected in any way negatively by these things, then maybe you're not resilient, or maybe you're just, maybe you're weaker and aren't quite capable of handling these situations. So to demonstrate, I'd like to ask Paul to come back if that's okay.
And here he is.
Hello. So I just want to know, have you had any stressful situations recently?
Absolutely none whatsoever.
Oh, well, perfect.
Didn't do that in rehearsal, did we? Yeah, well, I mean, this is one that I've used before, but there was one, and they're really innocuous, aren't they? But the one for me was I'd had to go into town, B&Q, not B&Q. It was a B&Q thing, and I was in the queue, and there was this very large gentleman behind me, and not large wide, large, tall, and very imposing. And what I did is he was getting too close. He wasn't distancing. And I was really getting uncomfortable. I was with my daughter, and then I just turned my back on him as a way of sort of, getting away, just getting away from him and not getting really, really annoyed. So that's what I did.
Okay, so sorry, for the rest of the day then, how did you feel that you coped?
Not too great. I mean, the fact that it still stayed with me, and I was still talking about it a week later. It wasn't a big deal, but it was just notable. And of course, we're all rather sensitized. Well, I certainly am, and I had my daughter there, so it stuck around. It didn't work terribly well as a strategy for resilience. It was just got myself out of a tight spot.
Okay, so that's then what we might call a patching strategy. Your ability to cope with life's stresses and negative situations is like a boat on the water, and Sticky and Chip there are demonstrating beautifully. So it's fine, plain sailing whilst everything's great in life, but then when we hit a stormy patch, or a negative situation is your stormy patch, and some damage happens to the boat, you're affected by it. And so you can patch it up, but you're still conscious of the fact that the patch is there, and you know that it'll maybe get you to port, so get you back to be able to rest and recuperate, but you maybe have taken on some water, it's bogged you down, and it makes it more difficult to handle the next thing that comes along. So the idea is that, if something negative happens to you, then you can hopefully get back to port in time to be able to repair it properly. But if you don't do that, if you kind of patch up and think, I'll be all right, I can just carry on as is, then you may hit some more bad weather, so another stressful or negative situation. Either the patch comes back off, or another one, it springs a leak somewhere else. So the idea is that you actually need to repair yourself properly, repair the boat properly, so that it can continue to be seaworthy, and it can weather any other storms that come your way. So the idea of a proper repair instead of a patch. So what Paul did when he was in the queue was to just turn his back on the gentleman, and so that was his way of handling it. It was a short-term solution. It dealt with the immediate problem. He just wasn't looking at him. But the idea of the proper repair is to really actually take a step back and understand what is going on for you. Why was it that was causing you the stress, the worry? What negative emotion was happening, and how then can you properly deal with it? So what was really going on for you in that moment then, Paul? What was it that was causing you the real issue?
So I was feeling very defensive. I was protective of Jan, who was with me. I was really angry with the guy, but I also realized that because he was bigger and taller than me, if I tried to do anything, sort of take evasive action, I didn't quite know how he'd react. So that was what was really, I was anxious So I was anxious way before I was angry, but I know part of my repertoire is that I get angry when I get frightened. That's both my good fortune and my curse.
So it sounds as though you felt intimidated by this chap, and also because you had Vianne, your daughter, there, that you maybe have been feeling protective of her at the same time.
Exactly that. Yeah, it was absolutely that.
So now that you've probed what was going on for you in more detail, how do you feel about how you reacted in that situation?
I think I wish I thought about it properly at the time. That's regrettable, because actually I think it really would have it really would have helped me to feel differently far sooner. Yeah, so I think that would have helped.
Okay, so
That would have helped.
the way in which I tend to think about resilience is that it's actually more of a reflection than something that you are in that instance. So you think back on a situation that was quite tough for you, and think back on how you handled it, and go, you know, actually, I did all right there. I did okay, and so you take that and you move on from it. So the key moment for being able to set yourself up for being resilient, or thinking about the fact that you may have been resilient after the fact, if you like, is to really understand in the moment what's going on. Think about that negative situation, the negative emotions that you may be having, and go, what is really going on for me here? So to take your experience with the man in the queue, it may not be that he was standing too close to you, it may have been, but other more underlying issues, such as feeling intimidated and wanting to protect your family.
Okay, so as far as resilience goes, being okay about not always being fine, or not always being on top of your game, is fine. I mean, that's the game here, isn't it? And
absolutely,
when something happens, the idea is to not just walk away or put up a tough front, but as far as you're concerned, Rachel, is if we just unpack it for a few moments in the moment, if we can, then that helps us to be strong in a completely different way. Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much. The next bit is going to be from Diane. So what you're talking about, Diane, is actually to do with structure and how you need structure to get along. How does that work in these really uncertain times that we're in right now?
Okay, thanks, Paul. It was something I just noticed when Rachel was talking, which links very well. Was she was talking about noticing what's going on. And you're right that I enjoy structured days. I love nothing more than a list and a plan the evening before. And when this lockdown started, I noticed that I did begin to notice a sort of low level, I'd call it, anxiety and stress. And I think that at first I just put it down to, this is what everybody's feeling. After all, we're worried about our own health. We're worried about the health of our families. We weren't seeing people. And I probably put a brave face on it. And, you know, anyone listening to this, if you've got any comments, or you know, put in the questions. I'd love to hear what you were struggling with and what made you anxious. And the turning point came once we actually were in a meeting, this group, and I can't remember the exact thing that was said at the time, but what I do remember is that suddenly I started to think about control. And I started to think about the fact that I felt out of control. And it was that feeling out of control that was probably the cause of the anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
So you realized that you were actually trying to control your circumstances in the sort of the ordinary way. And I guess you are sort of someone I know who is very sort of in charge of things. You are extremely well organized, but in the current circumstances, you realized that quite a lot was slipping away from you.
Absolutely.
But once you realized it made a difference that you couldn't be in charge of everything. Is that right?
You're absolutely right. And I think it was trying to work out what I could control. So just as you've got that visual, I can't control what the waves were coming. And that was sometimes needs of the family. I mean, I remember them wanting, my family wanted me to help out with the children, and suddenly they couldn't do that, and that caused me stress. I couldn't control those things, but I was also being overwhelmed, almost like waves, by people being helpful, and I'm sure people will recognise this, that we became zoomed out. I had so many Zoom calls, but I then thought, well, I can take charge of this. I can determine and evaluate what I'm being asked and decide, do I want to join in this? Am I going into this? And I might have upset one or two people, but I tried to explain it, that there are times when I used a phrase, and I've used this a lot, that everything is permissible, but not everything's beneficial. And it was me trying to work out how I structured my days and holding my planning, holding them loosely, so that my days were planned. But if something came along and I needed to change that or steer a different course, that was okay. That was all right. So this idea of doing some planning, but being comfortable, being okay with saying, oh, actually, today that isn't going to work for me. I'll change it. So I created some structure I'm comfortable with, but also had to be comfortable with the change.
So Diane, that sounds very attractive, and I think all of us would say, under normal circumstances, that's what we can do evenings and weekends to a degree. But we all have to hold down a job, and some people are in very structured hierarchies, very structured jobs where a lot is being asked of them. How does it work? Sort of, yes, where we are not often in charge of our work structure, or when all our children are at home, or when there really is, the people are just queuing up to get a slice of us. How does that work?
Totally, I understand that, and I'm sort of grateful in a way for having some control. But I was an HR director for many, many years. And one of the things that I found that was really important, and I've discovered through more coaching more recently, especially through people on furlough, there's something about, in my world, I call it contracting, and you do, we call, what is the contract between us about what's the expectation and what you'll deliver? And when I was at work in the office, I was very clear what I might want to expect from somebody, but also open for them to say, this isn't possible, you're being unreasonable. And trying to make sure that the day built in time for also the relationships in the office, so you develop trust, so you can have those sort of contracting conversations. Sorry, Paul, carry on.
No, go ahead.
It's come to mind, a little story that I coached somebody recently, and she's on furlough, and we're continuing this coaching relationship, and she talked about the stress that she was under, weirdly, because she was thinking, I've got to be at my computer all day long, every day, because they can't see me, but they expect me to be here and so forth. And there was a lot of stress. We talked through that and talked about the contracting. And then, strangely, and this is totally true, I happened to have a conversation with this person's boss about another subject. But I just said, how's it going for you? Furlough, and how's it going with your people? And what he said was, he referenced this person and said, do you know what? He said, she seems to me that she's constantly worried that I will think she's not performing properly and not doing something. And I'm not expecting that. And that was a great segue for me to say, I think you need to have that conversation with her. And so I would encourage people who feel they're not in control and to have that conversation with their boss and give themselves permission in the day. I spoke to somebody only this week. I said, if you were at work and you had a meeting with somebody and you wouldn't interrupt it, try putting a meeting with yourself in your diary. This is about allowing yourself and giving yourself permission as well, not to sort of think I've got to answer that email immediately so they know I'm at my desk.
Yes. So this some of the language that you're using, I'm wondering if people will be sitting there thinking, well, that sounds very nice and not really like me, like putting a meeting in the diary with myself. Now, I think some of those ideas that we might associate with sort of with therapy and counseling and sort of the be nice to yourself bubble bath approach to well-being, actually those things, no pun intended, really do hold water for all of us. So even if we think we're in that very, well, you know, undoubtedly we all think we're in an important job, but sometimes we think, well, my job is it. There's no leeway for this kind of stuff. Well, actually, maybe this is the time for people to revise that view and say, well, actually, yes, there is room for this, and there has to be room for this because we're having to work so much harder now at some very basic things like structure, like time.
You know, Paul, I was just looking at the visual that you used and thinking about, you know, if you want to use the analogy of a captain, and this captain could be the boss, they set forward a strategy, they're working, and some waves come along, and gosh, COVID-19 is a big wave. And the ones that are succeeding in the conversations being having are the ones that recognize they can't just keep going that course. They're having to say, in order to achieve what we still want to achieve, what is it that we need to do differently?
Yes.
I've seen some really super examples of that. So people are, when they're having those conversations, I think learning that. That's part of it.
There's Donna's chipped in. She said, I started working from home February in 2019 when my office closed, and Dinah's right. That feeling that you need to show you are working all hours is real. Donna also said, I've stopped taking a lunch break and I still feel that there is a risk that people will think I'm not working hard enough.
Donna, that's such a super recognition. And I've had a number of conversations with people I'm coaching about sometimes I do sometimes mentoring and coaching, so I can actually probably be a bit more directive, but give ideas and say, have we thought about this? And
yes.
There's small things for you to try and remove this feeling of presenteeism that you need to be there, and one is talk to you both times.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for that super fast treatment of structure. I've certainly in our conversations and right now have actually been strongly reminded about the contracting thing, and it seems such an obvious thing when you say it. But how many of us haven't had the most basic conversations with colleagues or line managers or indeed our team about what to expect? So thanks for the big reminder.
You say, you know, your real conversation strap line. Those things would be told, wouldn't they, where people can have the real conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Terrific. So Nigel's up next, and this is going to be all about ambiguity. And we arrived at these topics through a sort of quite a careful process. We all had this big session, you know, just flooded the page with ideas. And this was one of the ones that a number of us voted on. And so ambiguity.
Ambiguity, uncertainty, there's a lot of it at the moment, isn't there? I think with ambiguity and uncertainty is that it's uncomfortable to feel that way. And of course, at the moment, there's a lot of differing opinions, a lot of things that we don't know, where COVID came from, how long it's going to last, whether there's going to be a vaccine, whether to keep 1 or 2 meters away from people, and all of the decisions that we're trying to make at the moment. No, I mean, we've been living with ambiguity and uncertainty all our lives, whether it's the ambiguity of whether your train is going to turn up on time for getting home in the good old days when we were traveling into the office, the uncertainty whether you're going to be interrupted, and to Diane's section just now, whether your plan would be thrown out of the way because of interruptions from colleagues and so on. It's opinions as well. You know, in times before lockdown, it would be quite a natural thing to confirm with friends and colleagues what we think you know about things, whether you're for or against Brexit, or what type of holidays you like. You might be a beach person, and adamant how great they are, and how could no one like going on holiday on a beach and prefer going in a chalet in the mountains, and vice versa. Those who prefer chalets wondering why the heck you'd want to get sand in your swimming costume as a holiday. So we used to do it all the time and try and confirm what we thought we knew about things. But what's different at the moment is the scale of uncertainty and ambiguity, how many things we don't know. And there's a temptation to latch on to easy answers, a temptation to hear something on the news, for example, a professor saying that he holds out hope that there will be a vaccine, but perhaps forgetting all the other conversations and interviews that there have been around how long that vaccine might take, and all the various hurdles to go through. But there's some comfort, it's empowering to make our minds up about things. We can feel confident once we've made up our mind. But when we latch onto an opinion in the way that I've been describing, we can get defensive about it, because when that opinion is attacked, it's like our certainty is being attacked. When we have the blinkers on about a situation and don't really want to entertain any different thoughts or opinions. Now, perhaps
yes, just to interrupt you, Nigel, I think one thing that's happening a lot at the moment, particularly because of lockdown, and we hadn't talked about this before, but it strikes me that although there are some very important events happening, people seem to be especially vocal, especially prone to demonstrations on lots of different things. And it started months ago in the States with people refusing to socially distance on the West Coast. And then, of course, the dreadful events more recently involving the police and in the US. And so it is, people, I think, have become even more opinionated, even harder. People seem to be finding it even harder to listen, to pay attention to opposing views.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thinking about a WhatsApp group part of, there's been a few conversations there where there's been a lot of indignation and anger about how some people are behaving during lockdown. And like I was just saying, I think that there's a temptation to latch onto an opinion, put these blinkers on, and really defend that opinion to the hilt, because it feels like anything different, anyone doing things a different way or thinking a different way, is almost like challenging you directly and the conclusion that you've come to. Hence the anger.
So it's like what you're saying is that we're holding opinions, some of which we do believe in, but other ones which we really hold on to just to feel safer, to feel like we know what's what. We know, there's something solid, so there's something concrete to believe in, and something concrete to not believe in.
Yeah, exactly. There's safety and certainty, and of course, the black and white simple answers, yes and no's. There's only one way to do things, are the simplest, and in some ways, the ones that feel the safest. But the trouble is, you with those blinkers on, you're potentially cutting yourself off to what is, in inverted commas, the truth and the richness of reality.
Okay, so the richness you allude to, well, you could call it richness, and some people could say, well, it's just, it's stuff that isn't very nice. But what you're saying is that actually, if we are struggling to deal with the ambiguities, all the what ifs that we can't answer, actually being brave and addressing things the way they really are, or the bits that we can actually pin down, is going to actually make people feel, it's going to make us feel safer, because we're maybe dealing with reality. An example, can we make this more concrete?
Yes, well, I wanted to go back to, well, you may have a different example, but the example you were sharing with Rachel just now might be one that we could look at from a different angle.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it came up, and I thought, oh God, okay, but it is a good one, and okay. So, well, fire away. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if I remember right, you were describing how frustrating it was being in that situation in the queue, not knowing quite what to do. Your daughter was there with you, And forgive me if I'm putting words into your mouth, but I'm sure either this afternoon or the other day when we were talking about this in general terms, you said you're actually feeling quite angry towards the other guy for getting in your space.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was, and yes, it. I suppose I couldn't see why he wasn't getting it. And there's a lot of social cues, like I did glance at him a few times and try and send him the vibes, but I couldn't understand why he just wouldn't get it, why he couldn't see what he was doing wrong.
Yeah, you give him your best evil glare, and he still.
Well, it was, yeah. And I thought, you're not getting this, are you? And then the more I thought that, the worse it got.
Ah, okay. So it was almost like there was a bit of a spiral. You got the indignation increased.
Definitely. So what should I have done?
Well, I think the first thing is the awareness of what you're feeling, and it's a small step, but not necessarily a simple one. But that's the first step to recognizing that something different might be going on. In other words, that the strength of your reaction might be a clue that you are on the defensive, if you like, that you're not seeing the complete picture.
Okay, so recognizing it. I mean, yes, okay. That's quite hard, but yes, that would have been possible if I've suddenly noticed, actually, I'm really starting to throw my toys out of the pram here. Is this just about this situation? What's this really about? It's sort of slightly harking back to what was being said before by Rachel, but pausing before latching onto my unambiguous judgment that he was being an idiot and worse in my head.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that little phrase there, what is this really about, is quite key, because it seems like what can run through your head in that moment is the obvious explanation for what's really going on is this guy is being an idiot. You might think.
Yes.
But if one can get past that reaction and think, hang on, this is quite an extreme reaction. Maybe I've got the blinkers on. What can I then do to take those blinkers off? Well, it's flipping it right round and trying to empathize with the other person. Now, I'm thinking this is a thought experiment. There are going to be situations where it's just not going to be appropriate or possible even to empathize.
Hang on a second. I let the empathy words come up, and you've actually broken up, so it gives me an opportunity to bust in here. People are going to be thinking, empathize with this guy, and I'm thinking, why should I empathize with it? Because I have it in my head. Empathy is about when somebody else is struggling with their feelings. It's to actually think, okay, I want to help them. I want to help to do some emotional first aid on them. So I'm going to give them a break, even if I disagree with them. I'm going to try and find out what's going on for them. So I'll say, I mean, he was bouncing off the walls and obviously very impatient. So you're saying I should have really turned and said, or at least if I'd bothered to think in my head, maybe he's impatient. Maybe that's why he's edging closer to me. Oh, poor guy. He's had a bad day. He's feeling impatient. He can't wait to get out of here, which actually would have been a fair assumption. You say that's what I should have been doing.
Yes, and just that thought process on its own. So we're on the same page here as far as empathy goes, and how it's we often think of it as usually there for building a relationship and helping out the other person, but there can be as much value for you in empathizing with a person, even if it's in your head, as there sometimes is for the other when you're in a more normal setting and conversation, because it opens your eyes to what else is going on around you rather than just what's going on in your head.
So looking at it, I mean, looking at it from at the whole picture from a completely different angle, and saying, actually, what's happening here, and sort of opening my eyes and saying, actually, there's a whole load of things going on here, and it's not me. It's maybe I'm trying to make this too black and white, too straightforward. I'm right, he's wrong. And actually, by addressing what might have really been happening, even in my own head, would have been a way of staying more okay than I stayed.
yes, exactly. That word okay again, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels empowering to feel angry, but actually it's a much more pleasant feeling and more helpful mindset to be okay about things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's your connection's breaking up a little bit right on cue, so we're going to now move on to and Nigel. Thank you so much for that, and we're going to finish off with Natalie on her angle or on acceptance as another way of staying okay in these weird times. What's this acceptance things all about? Because acceptance sounds rather spiritual. In fact, almost I could say maybe even defeatist. I'm hoping you're going to say something different.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I am going to say something different. In the sense, we have been talking about feelings a lot. So what are the feelings for, actually? Feelings such as frustration, anger, fear, they can be very, very uncomfortable at their core. And they're supposed to be uncomfortable for us to pay attention. Because if we don't, they will only get louder. This is our subconscious mind is telling us that something is wrong. And if we don't respond and indicate that we are listening, it will continue to do so. It is one of the most common misconceptions that if we only feel, positive, all of this bit about feeling positive, that everything will be okay. But so what are the actual practical steps we can take to accept the feeling?
That sounds good.
To move on from that feeling, and when the situation hasn't actually changed, the facts haven't changed. So what can we do? And at this point, I would like to ask everyone, please think of a situation, perhaps a disappointment or another unpleasant feeling, and what did you do in that situation, and did it actually work for you, your strategy? If you could just take 1 or 2 minutes and put it in under the questions pane, that would be really, really great, and we will take a minute or two for you to do that.
So what did you do? When was the last time you got really fed up, or even a bit, and what did you do about it? That's the question to respond to in the question tab. So while we're waiting for some responses to come in, we won't go on to anything new, but it sounds like you've got some things lined up, some strategies lined up for how we can do something different.
Yes, definitely.
To handle feelings. So we've heard we've been hearing about holding plans loosely, not being disappointed, and Nigel was just saying about making sure that you don't waste time getting all hot and bothered about something when you're actually just going on your own opinion, when you haven't actually taken the trouble to understand what might be really going on.
Yes,
so
and it would be great to demonstrate the various strategies.
Okay, so we'll have a go at that now. So we've had one response. Somebody had a rant at their husband and then went for a run. Well, I think that is definitely going to fall into one of your strategy categories. So thank you for that one. Okay, so let's start while other responses. Oh, hang on, if someone else has just chipped in. In a meeting, there was a lot of talk but no action. I went and had a coffee and reflected on how I could move forward, or how it could move forward. So Fiona went and thought her way out of it. Okay, some strategies for us. I'm all ears, and I'm sure others are too. What have you got for us, Natalie?
That's good. Paul, can I use you as a guinea pig, please, just for a bit?
Yeah, fire away. Everybody else has.
So can you think of the last time you needed to cheer yourself up, and can you remember how you got yourself to move on?
So this one, yes, okay. So there was I seem to have had a lot of problems with things and having to take them back and stuff like that. And this one was about my cooker hood. The old one packed up, and so I decided that I was going to send this thing back, and I took pictures, and so what I did was I decided that the only way to handle it was through action. So that's what I did.
Okay, so that sounds like a strategy, distraction through action. So you took action. You probably didn't feel any much better for it, and the situation was still the rest was still the same.
Well, I was still waiting. I felt a bit better about it, but there was still that sort of idea: is this actually going to work? Because I was queuing for 3 hours on the phone in 3 different phone calls. So there was a lot, but it helped a bit. Yeah, it helped a bit, but there was still the sort of pregnant pause afterwards. Okay, now I'm going to have to wait 3 or 4 days to see if any of the people that I've spoken to actually take some action. So that's what I did in that case. So that's strategy number 1, is get distracted then.
Yeah. So was there a time, can you think of a situation when you managed your emotions better, when it worked better for you?
There's one big one, because you asked me to think about this. There's one big one a long time ago, I'm pleased to say. It was probably over 20 years ago. I found myself, so I'd been running the business, and it was going really badly. I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any money coming in. The rent was due. So I was just really, really up the creek. And there was seemingly absolutely nothing more I could do about it. And by chance, I'd done some sessions some years before in co-counseling. And one of the things and I was actually practicing it a lot at the time, and I had a co-counseling partner. And one of the things that we actually did was to learn to sit with really unpleasant feelings. And this sitting with your feelings has a rather interesting consequence, which is that it gets to the point where they don't get any worse. You notice it and you talk about it. And I went, and I didn't exactly hug a tree. I might have, I don't know. I might have to go up and say hi, but I thought, I've run out of money. I don't have any customers. This, and I just named out loud to myself and to the world everything that was happening and everything that I was feeling. And oddly, there was a kind of peace that followed after it. Well, I thought, well, it can't get any worse. And that was the game changer for me, actually.
So did it resolve it for you longer term?
Yeah, it did, actually. That was much more successful than turning my back on it. In fact, what I'd been doing was turning my back on things. At 5 o'clock in the evening, I'd say, okay, well, that's that. I don't have to worry about it till tomorrow. But obviously, I did. But this one was well, I've named it all. I've said it all. There is nothing left unsaid or unfelt. So that was the most successful ones. Yeah, definitely. Of the 2, that was the one. And in fact, we've had someone else has chipped in the questions pane. Lucy says, in the particular situation for me, I recognized that I couldn't change it and chose to accept it and decide what opportunities it offered me to do something different. Oh, that's interesting. So Lucy sort of sat with it. And
that's a perfect example.
Got clever. Yeah, that's a good one, Lucy. Anybody else would be great to hear. So yeah, so that was that one. And unfortunately, that was a long time ago, but I do still do that now, actually, when I remember. And B&Q was not one of the times where I remembered, unfortunately. It didn't seem the right time for it.
Sitting with the feeling is very effective. So Paul, I also know that you run. Why do you do that? If you could just tell very briefly.
Well, we have dogs, and so I have to. And I'm sometimes I've done some triathlons and sporting events in the past, but it's it also it does help just to get rid of that sort of excess energy. And yes, there is a kind of peace through tiredness. I think I do happen to do a lot of thinking while I'm running. I don't set out to do it, but things as the pain sets in and I get out of breath and my legs start to feel like lead, I do then stuff starts to flash across my mind. I'm sure I'm not the only one. There must be dozens of people listening now who say, yeah, well, that's true. So yeah, physical exercise is a big one.
Mm-hmm. The reason I asked you that is actually, everyone probably heard of the fight, flight, or freeze effect when we respond to a stressful situation. So a lot of stress hormones and adrenaline are released. And so when the event passes and we can return to the normal state of sort of rest and repair, then it's fine. But if the stress is kind of vague and ever present, as it is now for many, many people, we can get stuck in that response. So one of the strategies is getting out of those excess adrenaline, for example, and other hormones through physical exercise. So that can be very, very effective as a sort of quick fix in a way. I would also like to demonstrate perhaps this body-mind connection in a different, a fun way now, if
great.
if
Okay.
I may. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
All right. So
if everyone imagines having a lemon, so you put that lemon onto the chopping
I
board.
have some lemons here for those people who don't have much of an imagination. Here we are. Here's some lemons.
So you cut the lemon in half. You take a half and you start squeezing that lemon, and the juice is flowing, and you put some juice in your mouth and you start biting into that lemon. So you probably all just had a physical reaction to that, and it's an actual reaction to an image and thoughts that go with it. So this can be really, really powerful.
So what it was actually you described. So I was looking at, because obviously I put this image out, and it was actually listening to you describing the squeezing, and yes, it did. There was a bit of sensation at the back of my jaws. Be interesting to see if other people had a reaction there. But when we did this bit in rehearsal, it had a very similar effect, and so it doesn't wear off. So there is that very quick reaction, that connection that we have with our bodies. But I think that's a really good, a silly but interesting example to show actually we can make ourselves have physical sensations just by imagining something, and vice versa, by imagining something with a physical sensation. We can also change the way that we feel by working on getting rid of excess hormones or neurotransmitters that were built up by having negative feelings.
Yes, spot on.
I've got another example here. Fiona, she's gone for the more sort of cerebral, the intellectual approach. I use a sphere of influence, span of control sort of thing. And if I couldn't do either, in other words, couldn't influence or couldn't control, I just dump it and ignore it. Good one, Fiona. Yes, very much. So that presumably works for you, Fiona, because you've got that mind to says I can compartmentalize it. Ian chipped in, when I encounter a frustrating chain of correspondence concerning a business matter, I often don't reply quickly, or I just let matters take their course. It's amazing how often the events overtake matters and help to resolve the situation. And that's rather interesting. So Ian, you're kind of being rather patient about it and wise owl about it, and saying, well, actually quite a few of these things just fizzle out. So again, rather cerebral, intellectual, but often and obviously effective for you. So thank you for that one. Natalie, brilliant. Thank you for the experiment at the end, but also this thought that I'm left with, which is about staying okay with regard to acceptance, is really about it's about, sometimes it can be about distracting ourselves. We can get out of a tight spot. We can actually remove those neurotransmitters that we've generated with our sadness or anger by taking some exercise. But acceptance, it's coming back to that acceptance and the sitting with it strategy of really naming it and being there and saying, okay, this is the situation I'm in. That's probably the biggest one of all, by the sound of it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so questions. What are you thinking? Any other questions that you've got for us? This is a good moment to chip in with those. It may be that you've been holding back on your lunch and you need to get to it, but if you've got anything that you'd like to ask or chip in, this is a good moment to do it just before we finish off. So whilst you're thinking of any questions, what I'd like to suggest at this stage is that you take a piece of paper or your iPad or whatever you've got in front of you and make a commitment to actually do something new, that you actually decide to do an experiment, maybe something really, really small to change or to increase your feelings of well-being in any of the dimensions that we've talked about. You're in, with regard to ambiguity, perhaps, or structure in your day, or to these deep-seated feelings that have been building up but you've never managed to quite shake off. So have a think now. If you're not going to ask a question, have a think about one experiment that you're prepared to do, which is going to change things for you, even in a small way. And if you'd like to, you can actually pop that into the Q&A pane as well. So while we're waiting for a couple of people to answer, what about our crew? Are you going to do anything different as a result of these conversations that we've been having amongst ourselves in preparation for today? Yeah, what are you going to do differently, Nigel and Natalie and Diane and Rachel?
Yeah, it's funny, but one thing that occurred to me after we were speaking, actually, about ambiguity. It's funny how sometimes when you're talking about your own topic, it makes you think differently about it. And I was thinking about some of the news just today, pictures of people flooding to the beach, and how the knee-jerk response almost for me and a lot of people, I think, is to say, oh, how blooming silly to not social distance. But the thought experiment with situations like that, whenever you recognize, hang on a minute, why am I getting so angry about this? Thought experiments, okay, where are they coming from? For example, well, a lot of the people there are just probably blooming fed up about having been stuck indoors for a long time. Perhaps a lot of them aren't lucky like I am to have a garden. And so they're fed up. That's what's driving their behavior, because they feel like they're at the end of their tether.
And why not? Yeah, and so head out to the beach. Why not? I mean, yeah, actually taking a more balanced view, it does stop the annoyance. I saw some photographs in the press, some photos in the press yesterday about it, and I thought, wow, I can't believe it. But I think you're right. I think I took your advice at the time, and I thought, just let it go. They've got a reason, and trying to think of life from their point of view. Yeah, that's probably the way to go. Rachel, are you going to do anything different? Your life is changing quite a bit at the moment. You're just about to move home to another part of the country. Yeah, what are you going to do differently?
Well, with the imminent move, I'm very well aware that that's going to be a stressful time. It's one of the most stressful things you can do. So I think I am just going to take on board what Diane said about holding plans loosely. As you all know, trying to move house has changed. When we thought we had plans, has changed quite drastically several times in a very short space of time, which it's just, yeah, holding plans loosely and accepting that these things are very much subject to change, and that's okay. It'll happen. Everything will happen at some point, but also it's okay to be frustrated about those things as well.
Natalie, what about you? Are you going to do anything differently as a result of these conversations?
Well, I think I just have to remind myself more frequently to kind of make the best of each day. I like the idea that Diane presented of holding plants loosely. So I have to kind of balance it with living in the moment and also obviously having some kind of plan for reassurance. So I'm working on it.
And Diane, what about you? Anything new for you?
Yeah, I'm going to try and make shorter lists. Which is true. I am trying to make shorter lists because I tend to pile everything in, and now I know that it does have to be held loosely. I'm thinking, well, actually, what do I really want to achieve today? Don't put anything else on there. I can actually save some jobs for the next day or some tasks. It's perfectly
Excellent.
okay.
A couple of people, Lucy's going to try two things, both holding plans more loosely so that I don't get anxious when not totally in control, but also to sit with it. And Sally says, great tips generally, but Diane, I have started to book time in my calendar for me to actually do work, as most mornings are taken up with Teams meetings.
Absolutely dreadful.
So yeah, good move, good career move, Sally, to actually put some diary time into work. Kidding aside, I have heard of people shifting all of their work into the evenings and spending a lot of time in Zoom meetings, cheering other people up. So yes, lots of personal decisions to make, decisions even, and thinking. But thank you so much to all of you. You know, Rachel and Diane and Nigel and Natalie. Of course, thank you to Nicola, who's always in the background running the show, making sure that the technical wheels don't fall off the wagon. And of course, thank you to you all for trusting us with your time this Friday lunchtime. And we look forward to seeing you soon again. We're not going to have a webinar in July. We're going to take a bit of a break, but we're going to turn out some other bits and pieces for you to look at, more about that as we do that. So stay in touch with us. If you'd like to talk to us about something that's going on for you or for your organization, for your team, you can get in touch with us very easily. Just drop us an email or phone us up and just talk in confidence. And it doesn't bind you to anything, just to start off having a chat, just to bounce some ideas off us. Always really pleased to hear from you. Thanks for joining, and see you, well, right in the middle of the summer. See you probably around about August time. Bye for now.
Right.
Bye.